Shout out to Ring RQ, Julius, you legend. We're going to do a joint interview, yeah? Yeah, we'll do a joint interview, Julius. Thanks for the support. You're a legend. From your girls, Raven and Ellie.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. A continuation to a story I talked about in my previous video. What was supposed to be the Romero versus Alberto Puello fight. Apparently, Alberto Puello has tested positive for a banned substance, and now Romero is set to box Ismael Barroso for the newly vacated WBA title. Which is pretty convenient for Romero, who's kind of stumbled onto this world title opportunity. Ismael Barroso isn't as tricky as Alberto Puello, though most won't know that. BoxingScene.com has learned that the Dominican southpaw has tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug, which is expected to cost Puello his WBA super lightweight title. The 28-year-old Puello failed for an undisclosed substance in a test administered by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association. Puello, 21-0 with 10 KOs, has therefore been removed from what was supposed to be his first WBA 140-pound championship defense against Romero. Puello versus Romero was supposed to headline a Showtime Championship Boxing triple header on May 13th at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. And the show will go on. Just not for Alberto Puello, the second fighter over there on PBC Island of Dominican descent who has tested positive for a banned substance not that long ago, Michel Rivera, on the heels of his first loss to Frank Martin. He tested positive for a banned substance too. What are they putting in the mangú over there? Romero of North Las Vegas, Nevada, is now expected to meet Ismael Barroso for the vacant WBA super lightweight title in Premier Boxing Champions' main event on Showtime next month. Venezuela's Barroso, who sports a professional record of 24 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws, 22 knockouts, having already been knocked out 2 times. He was scheduled to compete on the non-televised portion of the show, thereby explaining why he's already on weight and able to stand in for Alberto Puello, though it all looks a little bit too convenient for me. Minimum you have to say that Romero is quite fortunate that things have turned out the way they've turned out, because Alberto Puello is a bit of a tricky customer, more boxer than brawler, a southpaw, an unbeaten one that vowed to make a statement opposite the ring. Romero, he won't be opposite the ring anybody in May. And I won't lie to you that a part of me suspects foul play. Perhaps I am too cynical, grown too cynical in my old age. But it's very convenient that Romero ends up opposite the ring Ismael Barroso, who's already been stopped 2 times. Guy's face looks like a catcher's mitt. This makes it that much more possible, that much more likely, that Romero, of all people, might actually see himself become a world champion. And I think that hurts the sport when a fighter like this... Rolly's a fucking joke. Seriously, he's fucking terrible. He's a joke. But with the right matchmaking, even a Rolando Romero can see himself become a world champion. I think it was Lou DiBella that once said, I could get a ham sandwich to 21-0, a turkey sandwich to 25-0.
What about pastrami?
That old quote highlights what we're looking at here. Whether it's exactly the way the story says it is, or this was a clandestine effort to make things easier for Rolly. Who's a fucking retard. You see, Romero, in spite of his limited boxing ability, he has more of a profile than, say, Ismael Barroso or Alberto Puello. He does. He has more personality. Even if he's not actually very good. And he isn't. I'd relish the opportunity to see Subriel Matias or Regis Pregarius beat the blood out of this kid. A guy like Rolly getting a title shot only helps characterize the fall from grace that boxing in America has experienced. I mean, we used to produce some of the best, the very best fighters in the sport. Now previous eras of boxing, a guy like Romero wouldn't come anywhere near sniffing an alphabet title, much less fighting for one. But not gonna make any bones about it, I think there was a clandestine effort to make things easier for Rolly, because it wasn't a foregone conclusion that he beat Alberto Puello. Wasn't. And I think all of this is an effort to see Rolly crowned a champion so that he brings something to the table for a Gervonta Davis rematch. Beyond this weekend's fight opposite the ring, Ryan Garcia, if Gervonta wins, he's not gonna pursue Devin Haney. He's not gonna pursue Shakur Stevenson. He'll run it back with this guy if this guy can bring an alphabet title to the table. And you say, what's the point in running it back? What's the point in a rematch? He already knocked this guy out before, but need I remind you, the PBC staged a rematch between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz.
There was no reason to do it.
There was no precedence for a second fight between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz, but they did it anyway, and they stuck it on pay-per-view.
So I wouldn't put this past them.
I wouldn't, and I don't. I think what we're looking at here is a clandestine effort to make things easier for Rolly, who isn't a very good boxer.
It's fucking terrible.
He's got a stupid-looking face, too.
But that's what I think this is, because Rolly does have more of a profile than Alberto Puello, than Ismael Barroso, and some of the other fighters that are around this weight.
Where outfits like Top Rank and Matchroom are in the business of grooming fighters and developing them into elite-level fighters to then showcase elite-level talent, the PBC's all about smoke and mirrors, man.
That's all they are.
That's what they do. I think this is all about setting up Gervonta Davis's next fight, his next pay-per-view, beyond this weekend's fight.
I wouldn't even care about none of this if it didn't involve an alphabet title, but it does.
And honestly, that's just sad. Just in keeping with the theme of all things PBC, Bob Santos, who trains David Morrell, unbeaten David Morrell, he says, after beating Yamaguchi Falcao, Morrell deserves a shot at Canelo or Benavidez.
The name of David Morrell was one of a few names mentioned for David Benavidez's next fight.
David Morrell, who will fight on the biggest card of his career this upcoming Saturday when he takes on Yamaguchi Falcao on the Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia undercard at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. The showdown will serve as the co-feature bout on the four-fight pay-per-view that is being produced by Showtime. The Cuban southpaw was originally scheduled to face Sana Agbeko, but Falcao agreed to step in on short notice when Agbeko was rejected by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Bob Santos works closely with the Ronnie Shields trained fighter and believes that he deserves a shot at one of the top fighters in the division with a victory on Saturday night.
And if he wins, he might get it. The David Benavidez people actually mentioned a David Morrell fight, potentially a David Morrell fight for later on this year.
There is a story within a story there. You know, Sana Agbeko, he wasn't none too pleased to get rejected by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and he suspects foul play. He said as much by way of his own social media.
After the opponent switch, the David Morrell people said they have no concern about the opponent switch. Makes no difference to them.
No concerns, they said. To which Sana Agbeko replied, of course he should have no concern. Falcao signed a contract to fight him long before I did. They actually started training for a southpaw before they started training for me, so what's his excuse? They knew what they were doing, and they pulled it off, but they'll pay for it.
Though if it's the way that Sana says it is, and they've been planning around a Yamaguchi Falcao fight all this time, why'd they bring Sana into it?
And why did they end up doubling back? Why did they end up revisiting a Yamaguchi Falcao fight? Well, according to boxing insider Rick Glacier, he called it the Heyman effect, and Sana Agbeko ran into it head on. PBC got Falcao at a cheaper price, so to get out of the contract with Sana, they got the commission to say they wouldn't license Sana. That's the whole enchilada. Sana should file a federal court lawsuit.
According to Rick, that's how you can explain the late replacement. Make of that what you will.
Now, David Morrell's going to be fighting Yamaguchi Falcao instead of Sana Agbeko, and if he wins, Bob Santos seems to believe that he deserves either a David Benavidez fight or a Canelo fight. He was quoted as saying he should get a fight against Canelo, David Benavidez, or any other big fight. Look, he's the only person who has a title in the division besides Canelo. So if Canelo doesn't want it, then Benavidez or any other top guy should be next. We are willing to fight anybody, Santos told BoxingScene.com. Morrell, who holds the secondary WBA title, had a very successful 2022 campaign, defeating Aidos, Yerbusanuli, and Calvin Henderson by knockout. The 25-year-old compiled an eye-opening 130-2 record in the amateur ranks before defecting to the United States.
And here he is. He's about to fight on Saturday.
Saying, I want to fight David Benavidez next. No more excuses. No more nothing. Let's fight!
I mean, you know this is a guy with a high ceiling and a solid amateur background because he's only 8-0, but he's making waves. Making waves already.
In his last fight opposite the ring, Aidos Yerbusanuli, He put that guy in a fucking coma.
This kid's got firepower.
And boxing ability. I've seen him. And I have to say, I am impressed, which is saying a lot, because this is a PBC fighter we're talking about. The emerging southpaw is still listed by most sports books as at least an 18-1 favorite to beat Brazilian veteran Yamaguchi Falcao in the co-feature before the Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight. Assuming Morrell wins, he knows exactly what he wants to do next. Right now, I'm 100% focused on this fight, Morrell told BoxingScene.com. This is a big opportunity. I'm focused on my opponent. I'm focused on the fight. That's it. If I'm the winner of this fight, I'm focused 100% on David Benavidez. I want to fight him. I think he'll want to fight me. So let's get it. No more excuses. No more nothing. Let's fight.
If they do, you have to wonder if the PBC will elect to bill it as a pay-per-view, since David's pay-per-view debut didn't make very many ripples, didn't make very many waves.
Reports indicate the ballpark figure for David Benavidez's pay-per-view debut was just under 100,000 buys. Benavidez has made it clear that he wants to challenge Canelo Alvarez next for the Mexican Icon's 468-pound championships, but if a heavily favored Alvarez defeats English southpaw John Ryder on May 6th at the Akron Stadium, could pursue a rematch with WBA light heavyweight champion Dimitri Bivol, who soundly defeated Alvarez in a 12-round light heavyweight contest last May 7th at the T-Mobile Arena. I think Canelo right now is not fighting Benavidez, Morrell said. If Alvarez beats Ryder and battles Bivol again in September or later this year, David Morrell would be one of David Benavidez's most appealing options.
The name of Demetrius Andrade is also in the running. His name is also in the hat, but I'd wager Demetrius would want more money for the fight than David Morrell would.
The relentless, strong David Benavidez would unquestionably be the best opponent of Morrell's 3-year pro career. The confident Cuban is convinced, though, that he is more than ready to beat Benavidez in what would be a fascinating bout between unbeaten boxers, both in the thick of their physical primes. I have everything, Morrell said. I have the moves, power, defense, the attack. I have everything to win the fight with me and Benavidez.
He does bring power to the table. There's a reasonable enough argument there that David Morrell would be the biggest puncher David Benavidez would have fought so far.
Bigger puncher than Caleb Plant, by and large. Caleb Plant...
David Morrell gave his thoughts on David Benavidez's performance against Caleb Plant.
He said to me, the first 6 rounds, Caleb Plant was winning, Morrell said. After the 6th round, he didn't throw strong punches. Nothing. He only went back, back, back. I was like, what the fuck are you doing, man? You're up in the fight. Keep going. I don't know what he was doing. But congratulations to Benavidez. It was a good fight for him. If Benavidez had one more round with which to work, Morrell predicted he would have knocked out a bleeding and fatigued Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant didn't back up all the talk from the press conference, Morrell said. He talked the talk, but didn't walk the walk.
Perhaps not, but he went the distance, and that's more than he did opposite the ring Canelo. Canelo finished him.
And the very basic David Benavidez did. And I'll tell you something. I like the sound of David Benavidez versus David Morrell. The caveat is that the PBC might decide to bill this fight as a pay-per-view. And you're telling me that David Benavidez versus a guy with only 8 professional bouts...
I'm sorry, but that's not box office worthy.
It's not. That's a regular Showtime fight, or it should be.
It should.
Demetrius Andrade, who's also in the running for a Benavidez fight, he'd likely want more money for that fight than David Morrell would. David Morrell only has 8 professional contests, after all.
You can't go asking for the moon and the stars with a record like that.
It's not even saying that he's a bad fighter. I don't think he's a bad fighter. I don't think this is a bad fight. I think it's a great fight. But what I don't think is that it's box office worthy.
You can't decide to put every halfway decent fight behind a paywall.
On the premise that it's a halfway decent fight, you'll find that you're not going to get the cooperation you're looking for if you do that. A byproduct of Showtime's shrinking annual budget for boxing. They ain't got as much money to play, so the most that they can hope to do is stick these guys on pay-per-view.
Satisfy their financial demands that way.
What the fighters and their teams hope to make on the premise that the money will come from me and you.
Instead of their annual budget, because their annual budget, it's shrinking.
And it's not a bad fight, I'm telling you. It's a good fight. Battle of the Unbeatens, but I don't know.
You're supposed to pay $80 to see these two guys fight?
The buy rate for this fight would likely look the same, if not worse, than the buy rate for the Plant fight.
David Morrell's a talented fighter, but he's not well known.
Just some things to think about. And finally, further confirmation of the 4-man box-off the Saudis want to put together, Amir Abdallah of Saudi's Skill Challenge Entertainment has confirmed that they're in talks with reps for all 4 fighters to stage Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder on the same bill in December, though nothing is concrete yet.
And that much we kinda knew already, though further confirmation from Amir Abdallah himself begs the question, why did Tyson Fury take to his own social media this week and deny that any of this was going on?
We have confirmation from Eddie Hearn, confirmation from Malik Scott, who trains Deontay Wilder, and now we have confirmation from Amir Abdallah, making Tyson Fury the odd man out.
Why did he deny any of this was going on?
Maybe it's because no matter who you get the story from, it entails him fighting Alexander Usyk towards the end of this year. And maybe that's the bit of it that he takes issue with. Maybe it's not Usyk he wants to fight in December. Maybe he's holding out hope he can fight Anthony Joshua. We know that Eddie Hearn said in plain English,
Anthony's gonna have a big fight in December. A big fight with either Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury.
So when you think about that, and you think about how selective Tyson Fury is, which doesn't get said enough, I think that he wants to have these fights in a particular order. I don't think he wants to fight Alexander Usyk before he fights Anthony Joshua, because Usyk could jeopardize the Joshua fight.
Maybe what he's telling himself is, yeah, Wilder's in the running for a Joshua fight, but so am I. The difference is, I've got a world title. Wilder don't.
Perhaps he can use that WBC title to entice Anthony Joshua to take him on in December instead of Deontay Wilder, and let him fight Alexander Usyk.
Maybe that's what Fury's telling himself, and maybe that's why he's the one guy who isn't committed.
He's the one guy coming out and denying these reports that are getting around fast.
Maybe that's why.
I told you. The impression that I've got from Tyson Fury when it comes to an Usyk fight is that he doesn't fancy that fight. He doesn't really want to have it. In spite of what his fanboys might have you believe, I still hold him responsible for the fight's initial collapse.
When it was moved from Saudi over to the United Kingdom, when he started up with all those demands and all those time constraints and all of that stuff, that was his way of sabotaging this fight, because this isn't the fight that he wants to have.
If he ever plans on having it at all, at minimum, I think he'd prefer to have the Joshua fight first.
Anthony Joshua, who Amir Abdallah said, in reference to all these reports and all these rumors, has no issue with Anthony taking an interim fight, a keep busy fight, over the summer months. And many of us feel that he needs to. One fight with Derek James in your corner isn't gonna cut it.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not gonna start gelling with that guy and really absorbing his instructions after just one camp. You need more time with him. A fight over the summer would suffice if you plan on having a mega match towards the end of the year.
It's only right.
In tandem with the issues I've raised before, you don't want to go holding up your own schedule and stifling your own progress on the premise that you may or may not have a mega match at the end of the year. That could be more time squandered. Just because the Saudis want to do this, don't mean they're going to succeed.
Do you remember that well over a year ago, they offered to do the Joshua versus Fury fight, and the fight was all but done. Then it fell apart.
Due to Fury's ongoing mediation arbitration with Deontay Wilder, more recently they wanted to do Usyk versus Fury.
That fell apart too. And in Amir Abdallah's own words, which we talked about here on the channel, he couldn't explain it. The money was there. In fact, he said one fighter, just one of the fighters, stood to make more money than the fight was actually worth.
Fury was the common denominator.
So I'm just saying, don't get your hopes up.